In this mini lecture, we're going to cover Chapter 3, which looks at stakeholders and corporate social responsibility. So the origin of stakeholders started in 1931 with A.A. Burrell, which basically said that corporations should create benefits that are in the interest of their shareholders or in the interest of their owners. Um, and managers should consider themselves trustees and guardians of investments that are made by the shareholders. So it was really a shareholder model where it was kind of looking at, doing what's best for those who have investments into the company. In 1932, E. Merrick Dodd said corporations are allowed to become legal entities because they serve a purpose to the community instead of just solely being there to provide financial gains or to earn a profit for the shareholders and owners. So we started to really move to this stakeholder viewpoint. In 1970, Friedman said the social responsibility of a business is to increase its profit. And in this viewpoint, he argued that the responsibility is fundamentally to increase the profitability of a firm. So really, again, kind of looking at just the responsibility of a company is to make money, which we know is not true today. In 1984, Edward Freeman took a viewpoint of stakeholders were not just the people who had invested in the company, but were any individuals or groups that could be impacted by the actions of a business or a firm. And so this really broadened the definition of stakeholders to be closer to what we see in our modern day, and not necessarily just looking at profitability. And so today we look at stakeholders as any group that has a vested interest in the operations of a firm. So obviously it includes our investors or shareholders, it includes our employees, customers, our political groups, communities, government, suppliers, the people who provide us with our goods to make our products, and trade associations. So it's a much more holistic viewpoint. When we look at management and stakeholders, we have to look at how moral our management is. So we have three types of managers, the first being immoral. This is where the manager doesn't really care how their decisions impact stakeholders. Again, really looking at that bottom line or that profit perspective. Amoral is not necessarily focusing proactively on ethical issues, but isn't trying to purposely go against social or legal norms that are expected. And moral managers really understand the importance and relevance of considering ethical issues when making decisions. So what kind of impact do stakeholders have on organizations? Well, they help to establish expectations about how the company should perform. They actually experience the effects of a corporate behaviors. So if a corporation does something, the stakeholders, such as customers or employees, will actually have experienced those effects on themselves. They evaluate the effects of a corporation's behaviors, and they act upon their interests, expectations, experiences, and evaluations. So they really help to shape an organization. A new way of looking at profit or of looking at reporting for organizations in terms of the stakeholder model is the triple bottom line, where instead of just focusing on financial reporting, we focus on reporting on how actions have impacted the people, so customers, employees, anybody, government, etc. How those decisions have impacted the planet, and then obviously how it impacted profit. So what is the benefit of a corporation? All right. Corporations today are looking at addressing not just financial aspects, but social and environmental objectives. So they need to meet social and environmental standards. They need to be accountable legally, and they need to build business constituencies for public policies. So suppliers are also stakeholders, and suppliers are the people who provide us with the goods and services mostly goods, that we use to make our final product or service. And so Intel's supplier ethics expectations are that suppliers must be in strict compliance with the laws. They must follow the law. They must have respect for their competition, so don't do things that hurt their competition. And they may not have any conflicts of interest with any other party. All right, we also have this concept of outsourcing where we assign a function or a task that was previously done with in our company. And those can also be considered suppliers and stakeholders as well. I think when you think of outsourcing, think of every time you call customer service, a lot of times that is not done within the company. It's done by a third party or an outside entity. But those are also stakeholders and they also need to live up to the ethical expectations of the company they're doing that work for. All right, customers as stakeholders. Customers expect, and even in today, and especially in today's day and age, they require ethical behavior. They want their items manufactured um, in an ethical manner. They want marketing, sales quotes. They want ethical distribution. They want there to be good customer service. So customers have a big stake in ethics as well. I think you see a lot of companies that are actually promoting how they're ethical in order to satisfy their customers. I've seen investors who only invest in ethical companies because they don't want to invest and put their money into companies that aren't being ethical. We see companies that um, um, when you look in your book, they talk about free trade. So if you look at Starbucks, they only utilize coffee that is fair trade, meaning that the people who grow the coffee are paid a fair price for their coffee. All right. So NGOs government as stakeholders. Government mostly looks at compliance and laws. But the thing about government is that they also have the authority to punish firms and employees who are unethical. So we have like the Sarbanes-Oxley, which you can read about or we've talked about. For example, if there's an oil spill, they can require the company to clean up the oil spill. So they're really more on the laws and compliance and making sure people do good things. NGOs, like non-government organizations or nonprofits, they're really looking at specific causes like human rights, environment, climate change, individuals' freedoms, really looking at making sure that we have these organizations that are help making sure that companies are ethical or proponents in ethical behavior. Right, local community or society, they focus largely on quality of life. So we look at, is this generating pollution? What's this doing with traffic? Are we creating jobs? These are all things that impact communities, either positively or negatively. All right, so how do we analyze whether a company is doing what's right for their stakeholders? Well, there's 5 steps that can be taken. So set out project goals and milestones. Um, Identify everybody who's impacted, all right? And what are their expectations? And rate each stakeholder in order of importance and relevance, or even who might be most impacted. And then identify actions that are required in order to manage your expectations. So this will really, if you follow these steps, this will help you to make sure that you're not negatively impacting your stakeholders. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this concept. It's called corporate social responsibility. And this is really the obligation that companies have to develop and implement courses of action or programs that have a positive impact on society, both locally and globally. So, what are the economic responsibilities? What are the legal responsibilities? What are our ethical responsibilities? What are responsibilities to people, to the planet, etc.? And so we look at this pyramid of corporate social responsibility or CSR, and we start out by being profitable is the first thing. A company or an organization isn't going to be in business if it's not profitable. The second tier is they have to obey the law. Next, they should be ethical, right? So making good decisions. And then the last one is being philanthrop, philanthropic or giving back. And so you see a lot of companies that give back to local children's sports teams like baseball teams, or they give money to schools, or they have a charity. For example, my bank that I use, they um, obviously have to be profitable. They have to obey the law. They're very ethical, but they also give back, and they have a nonprofit. They have a charity that helps sick children and their families. So, what are some different models of corporate social responsibility? Well, the business case model basically says that I'm going to view corporate social responsibility as just a way to generate financial results. So, I'll be socially responsible because it's going to make me more money. It's not really the best model. The social values model is that a firm commits to CSR and it's based on specific issues as a critical factor in the decision-making process. So they have specific issues they're looking at when they're making decisions in terms of corporate social responsibility. And then there's the Syncretic stewardship model, and it's more than just a program or activity that you do. It's actually driving a lot of your management decisions. It's a management philosophy, and it's intertwined into their day-to-day operations. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the brand Patagonia. They make a lot of clothing, specifically like outdoor clothing. Their whole premise is that they make ethically sourced clothing and clothing that reduces your carbon footprint. So when they make their products, they're doing it in a very environmentally friendly way, which I don't know if you knew this or not, but a lot of the clothing we buy is made in ways, sorry, in ways that is not very good for our environment, especially items that are made overseas. They will have rivers that are just full of dye from clothing. It's pretty sad, actually. All right. So, how do employees, what about employee engagement and corporate social responsibility? So, employees can be part of this as well. Excuse me. So, we have the transactional approach, which is basically firms develop programs to serve the needs and interests of employees who might be interested in participating. They can be very short term. It's kind of like the most basic level. Next is relational, and this is where you're creating CSR programs that are mutually agreed upon between the firm and the employees. And here we're starting to get people involved, have mutual trust, have shared interests. And then the developmental approach is being more proactive, having a more comprehensive commitment by both the firm and the employees, and this is going to be the highest level. So how do we implement CSR? So we have, you know, different orientations. It can be project, quality, strategic, or transformational oriented. I'll let you kind of read more about those. And then how do firms address stakeholder issues? All right, so what level do they take on this? They can be skeptical, where again, we're looking at more of the shareholders. They can be pragmatic. They recognize the current and future benefits of interactions with their stakeholders. Um, but they're and they and through these relationships they can use influence and power to help achieve their financial goals. They can be engaged with their stakeholders, or they can be idealistic and where they're really serving their stakeholders, and the good of society is really their primary goal. All right. It's also important. CSR and ethics also can help a company to have a good reputation. You can pause it and read more about this. And then philanthropy is just giving back. And you can look at your competition and your orientation, but really the action of firms can benefit through society by giving back. So we can look at that example of the bank. Or you can look at, I think the Ronald McDonald House is a really great example, where McDonald's creates housing for children and families who need a place to stay. So that's just a quick mini lecture of Chapter 3. Contact me with questions. Thanks.